I think we're live. Let me know if you guys can hear me and all that sort of stuff. I've been having internet problems today, as I mentioned in my post earlier. So we're going to see how this goes, and hopefully it's working all right. The numbers look like they're okay. They're a little lower than usual. So to give you guys a little bit of background, we had a decent snowstorm last night, and the internet here has been jacked up all day. I don't know if somebody like hit a pole or something like that, or what's going on, but it's the internet has been really slow today. So anyway, I had to like completely reload my Dropbox to get anything to come over from the files that I uploaded last night. But anyway, let me just quickly adjust the... Why is this not working? Okay, there we go. Let me just quickly adjust the back end of this video, because I didn't put any tags in or anything. In the meantime, let me know where you guys are watching from. All right, that'll have to do for now. But anyway, so we're going to have a little bit more... usually live streams are pretty upbeat here and such like that. Today we're going to take a little bit more reduced tone, because we are going to be... One of the main topics that we're going to be talking about today, obviously, is the terror attack in Australia that occurred. And I don't think that there should be a whole lot of marketing or a whole lot of adulation associated with a topic like that. So I will tell you a couple times throughout the live stream today that all of our live streams are currently sponsored by First Form. I appreciate them for being a longtime supporter of the channel at this point in time. They allow us to do this job. They help us do that. I don't think that they would probably want us to be blasting their name out there, but just know that they help pay the bills that make this live stream possible. So thank them very much. I have a link pinned in all the relevant places for you guys to go over there, check out what they got going on, and anything that you buy while you do that supports the channel. So I think that we'll probably hit it one more time today after we switch topics, so to speak, into something a little bit better, a little less on the edge, and turn my phone off so it won't go off while we're doing our live stream today. But basically, what I wanted to talk about is what I've been able to find from this whole situation. If you're just now tuning in and you haven't kept up to speed on what's going on or what has happened, two gunmen stormed a beach in Australia, a populated center, and I'm going to try to be a little bit less direct with these. Somebody says low volume. Let me fix that. Low volume. Turn your speakers up, maybe. Anybody else report low volume? Let me move this a little bit closer to my face. Two gunmen stormed the beach. Well, I don't know if that's the right term, because anyway, two gunmen opened fire on a crowd of folks that were celebrating a religious holiday, Hanukkah. The gunmen were of a particular persuasion that usually finds them fairly adversarial to folks that would celebrate Hanukkah. We'll just leave it at that. And there was loss of life. There is currently, as far as I know, there are 11 folks that lost their life, countless more injured, and it's a terrible thing. It's an absolute terrible thing, and I guess what I would say here is this is another example of failure of government, incapable of providing for its citizens, and the government in this case has a duty to do so because they have disarmed all of their citizens. They have banned the sale, ownership, transfer, importation, all that sort of stuff of arms for people to use in Australia. In order to obtain a weapon in the continent, an entire continent, the largest gun-free zone in the world, in order to obtain a weapon in Australia, you have to have a good reason. And that is, thank you, Randy, for updating me on that. I read the headlines just before I started the show. Before I started doing the thumbnail, he reports that there are 16 that have since passed away. So that is very unfortunate. In order to obtain a weapon in Australia, you have to have a good reason to, and that's not the term that they use, but you have to have a compelling reason to obtain that. And self-defense is not one of those reasons in Australia. You do not have a right to self-defense in Australia. Thankfully, there was an individual by the name of, let me make sure I get this right because it's spelled very similar. Let me make sure that I get this right. Gosh, come on, man. Internet is, I think I'm soaking up all the bandwidth and it's not loading. Anyway, I think his name is, if I remember correctly, it's Ahmed Al-Ahmed. So a fruit dealer, looks like a 50-year-old dad, right? Ish. A guy in his middle years. It's reported that he was a fruit vendor at the beach. Sees one of the dudes on the lawn just shooting into the crowd and literally tackles him. You can find the video. I can't show you the video. Unarmed, comes up behind the dude, tackles him, takes his weapon from him, and is then subsequently shot by his co-assailant that was in a raised position on a bridge, basically. So as far as I can tell from the videos that I have seen, it looks to me like there are, again, two shooters that we know at this point in time. The shooter on the lawn, like down by the beach, looks to have been armed with some kind of shotgun. It has and again, very grainy photos. I can't show you any of it, obviously, but it looks to me like this person was armed with a shotgun. It had a very long tube underneath of it, and that's what I'm using to base my analysis of the video. Usually, if you've got a tubular magazine underneath of it, and that tubular magazine is comparable in size to the barrel, both in length and in girth, usually what we're talking about is a shotgun. Now, it is entirely possible that it could have been some kind of weird, like, pump action rifle cartridge weapon. Perhaps, I don't know. But the video of that one is very, very grainy. And there's just no way that I can identify that weapon other than I believe it to be some kind of shotgun, right? So he's on the ground shooting rounds into the crowd, and this dude, this just random Joe, runs up behind him, tackles him, takes his weapon, points it at him, right? He's not allowed to shoot him, right? He'd probably go to prison in Australia if he had shot him. Not to mention that if he were to discharge that weapon, the cops in the area that are reportedly have had zero response, basically whatsoever. They basically froze, which is what we would expect out of, you know, those a country that thinks it's a good idea to ban guns. That they quite possibly would have misidentified him as an assailant and shot him. So he probably did the right thing for his long-term survival by not actually shooting that dude. If you've seen the, if you see the video, nobody in the chat says it might have been an over/under. Oh, that's cute. He said an over, down, under. That's cute. All right, that's funny. A little bit of levity, I suppose. It's entirely possible it could have been that. Right. Again, it's a very grainy video. I can't tell you what it was, but it's either something like that or some kind of shotgun. It does look to me like it is kind of, it's got a very long forearm on it, which tells me it might be a semi-automatic shotgun, but that's also illegal. Well, all weapons, you know, are pretty difficult to get in Australia. So definitely the semi-automatic stuff. But I would say that. Now, the dude on the bridge, I think that I have identified that weapon as the, and again, you guys have seen the thumbnail, and you guys can pull up your own images. You're going to have to pull up a video and stop it, basically, to get any kind of image. But I believe the weapon that was used by the dude on the bridge, and my folks at Brett are going to be mad at me for this. If I am wrong, then I will submit an official retraction in a video later. But I believe that that is currently, that is what I believe was used by the individual on the bridge. Now, the videos that you see from different angles will tell sort of that story, I think. Initially, I thought it was some kind of semi-automatic rifle because of the rate at which he was firing, but after watching the video from a different angle, I believe that it is a straight pull bolt action. The angle from kind of like this perspective, like there's a video of the dude on the bridge like this, and you can the POV is kind of like this over here. Very shaky cam, looks like it might have been at that point in time, but now having seen it from this angle over here, I believe that that is the weapon that was used. Now, obviously, I cannot tell you the caliber or anything like that. That would be very difficult to do from a very shaky, tense video. But those are the weapons that I believe that were used. Some kind of shotgun and some kind of straight pull bolt action, which I believe to be Did I lose audio? What the heck is going on? Why did we lose audio? Oh, you know what? Sorry, guys. I hit the wrong thing on my OBS. Here, let me try that again. Sorry. I have a whole bunch of different settings on here. Can you guys hear me now? Can you guys hear me now? I think you can probably hear me now. So what I was saying is that I believe that this is the weapon that was used during the assault from the bridge. And the reason that I believe that is if you watch it, there's a couple things here. If you look at this section of the BRX1 from Beretta, if you watch the video from the bridge, you can see a large chunk of metal being moved in a straight pulled bolt action. And it seems to have this profile. It's also a relatively chunky gun, although it is a bolt action weapon. It appears to me to be relatively rapid to move. Like, he didn't do a whole lot of extra hand motions to make it happen. The other thing that is kind of indicative, if you watch the video from the perspective of the bridge, from a brave person that was actually filming it, is there is this high visibility tab here that is visible on the side of the weapon as well as here in this stock photo. So it's even though this is a bolt action rifle, this is a very, shall we say, unique profile bolt action rifle. So I sincerely apologize for that whole thing being really bad on the audio. I basically have a whole bunch of different profiles that I use in OBS to be able to do various things on the screen, and I just simply clicked the wrong one because I'm an idiot. All right, I'm entirely incompetent, and I clicked the one that I usually use for taking like quick screen captures, instead of the one that I use for live stream figures. And one of them has an audio input and one of them doesn't. So, my bad. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. So, anyway, you guys can let me know if you think that my synopsis is on, if I'm over target on that one. If I am wrong and it is not the Beretta BRX one, then I will submit an official retraction of that statement, in a dedicated video. Because not that Beretta has anything to do with anything that was perpetrated here, but it's still not a good thing when your stuff ends up in the hands of evil people. I have already, so people are talking about the nationality and all that sort of stuff and names of the shooters. I would really ask you, the person who has posted their names, I would really appreciate it if you would delete your comment, please. We do not want to give them fame, because that's the kind of thing that kind of ideology thrives on. And I would ask you to please go ahead and remove your comment. I will, I don't censor folks, but I would ask you to not feed into that. I think we can all see what this is, and there's no reason to actually give them anything more than they have already been able to get. So what I wanted to talk about in relation to this, in addition to the fact that this just happened, is Australia has, for a long period of time, been a bastion of gun control, like a thing that has been consistently used by anti-gun forces around the world to point to, say, look, these guys over here do it, and it's working great over there. Yeah, it's not working so great over there, because the fact of the matter is evil exists, and there's nothing you can do to get the evil out of the world. The only thing you can do as a good guy is be able to react. We're behind the 8 ball. We always will be. Colin, thank you for removing that comment. I appreciate you. I don't like to censor you guys, right? And I like to not push the buttons myself, but I think that everybody can I think everybody can understand where I was coming from on that one. So Australia has been a problem child for a long period of time when it comes to a poster child for the anti-gun folks around the world to say, hey, they do it here and it's working great. And it's obvious that it's not working great there. Okay. Because we all know that even in our country, a country that has the right to keep and bear arms, that the places that you see stuff like this happen, mass shootings is what we'll call them, incidents of violence in this country, by and large, center around places that curtail the right of the people to defend themselves, just like Australia does. Where do you see rolling gun battles and people getting shot every single day in this country? You see it in California. You see it in Chicago. You see it in New York. Those are the places that you see it, because those are the places that have made it difficult for people to defend themselves. And then if you look at this incident specifically, just like we've seen in instances time and time again, where you have horrific things like this happen, law enforcement is unprepared to respond, crippled at the time, at the critical period. The only way that you can stop this sort of thing is to immediately respond with insurmountable return force. And that means that dude bro, hero of the day over there, Ahmed, fruit vendor dude, should have had the capability to take that dude out from range. He should have been able to reach under his cantaloupes or whatever the hell he was selling that day and off that dude, instead of having to charge him, take his weapon from him, and get him to walk away, waiting for the cops to sit there and do anything, while saving lives, disarming that dude, gets shot a couple times by the other assailant. Unacceptable. Trust the science, not the statistics. Right, exactly. There are lots of, in the chat, you guys are pointing out that there was lots of Googling of the dude's name before the incident. Yep. You guys, look, facts are facts, okay? Here's the thing about Australia as well. As somebody is pointing out in the comments right now, that Australia, we talked about the gun side of things, but Australia has continued to march in the direction of control of its, what I'm going to call subjects. I don't believe them to be citizens. They are not treated with the rights afforded to a citizen. They're going on a tirade against things like machetes. I'd be surprised if gardening tools are available after this incident in Australia, because they just have the exact wrong response to anything like this. It's the progressive response, which is more government, more control, less safety for the folks on the ground. That's what it comes down to. I mean, a microcosm of this, because it all stems from like British rule, right? And then like everything became independent afterwards. But I was recently in the Cayman Islands, for instance, where it's a former British territory, and the gun control there is so strong that you can't even have like you can't have a bow and arrow. You can't have like knives over a certain size and all that sort of stuff. But like I was there to scuba dive, and you can't have like a spear for like spearfishing even there. So like they're super problematic, and it all kind of comes from the same line of thinking that originates from Great Britain, UK, and kind of filters down. We've gone in a completely different direction, and I think we have a winning formula. And that's what I would say about it. Somebody asked for the medieval hood. Yes, okay, so Joshua Gibson said something earlier in the day on my original post. He said he asked for the medieval hood to get let down. I don't have a medieval hood, man. I don't know what you're talking about. You'll have to send me an image of a video or something like that, or a link of where I've worn a medieval hood to be able to figure out what it is that you're talking, because I don't own one. So anyway, that is my dissertation on what I believe has happened in Australia, my take on it. This sort of stuff is going to continue to happen around the world as long as we continue to try to integrate particular populations into Western society. And we are unwilling to allow people around the world to provide for their own protection. Because the only way that you stop this kind of thing from happening is down to the ideology that drives it. You have to make it unsuccessful. You have to make the chance of success so small that it is not worth what they think it is worth. I think that even though one assailant is dead and another one is critically injured, as far as I saw last time, I checked the headlines. I think that in those dudes' minds, they felt as though this was a successful attack because of the ideology involved. The only way you defeat that kind of ideology is to make it unsuccessful. And the only way to make it unsuccessful is to meet it immediately. So that we aren't talking about an incident like this clear across the pond, across the world, right? Something that happened on the clear other side of the planet, right? Some jackoff in Ohio is now talking about this, right? The only reason that we're talking about this is because they were able to accomplish something in their minds, right? They were able to go and do a thing. If it had just been a blip where some militants showed up and were immediately shot in the face, we would be making memes about them instead of what we're doing, right? If they would have showed up to the beach and some Crocodile Dundee dude had come out of the fucking bushes and wrecked them, then we would be making fun of them right now instead of having a serious discussion about this. And that is how you beat that ideology. But until the world screws its head on straight, that's never going to happen. And I don't see that happening anytime soon because, quite frankly, we're headed in the wrong direction. But you cannot fix people. You cannot fix this with low IQ solutions, is what it comes down to. I see what's going on here. Joshua Gibson says the abolish the ATF video thumbnail from 11 months ago. thought I had an Arabic head covering and not medieval. No, that's not what that is. That is from Game of Thrones. It is literally the image of the one woman with the bell yelling shame, right? Like, that's what that is. That's just my face superimposed on that image, so that you guys can see what he's talking about here. Let me go to. Hang on. I'll just pull up the actual image so that we can get some. Let me find a good one. This one. All right, let Photoshop load up. All right. Live stream figures this time. He's talking about this image, right? And this is this image. I even photoshopped the bell in there. Come on, man. Get with the times. So that's what that is. Not a medieval head covering. I guess you could say that it is a medieval, sort of a medieval fantasy novel. I would consider it a high fantasy Game of Thrones. But yeah. So that's what that is. Sorry for the confusion there. But anyway, all right. So let's shift topics here, because, man, I tell you what, the opening of this was a real letdown. Again, our live stream today is brought to you by First Form. We're not going to do a giveaway or anything today. I just want to let you know that they make these live streams possible. We'll do one later in the week when we got something a little bit more lighthearted to talk about. But there's a link pinned at the top of the chat that tells them that I sent you if you go there and buy anything, and it generates commissions back for the channel. That's all we're going to do today. And move on. And we'll do the giveaways and all that sort of stuff on a separate live stream later in the week. So anyway, the next thing I want to talk about today is completely shift gears and talk about my most recent eval video dealing with the Ravener 12. There were a lot of really good comments on the Ravener 12 video. And there were some really good questions there that I wanted to kind of fill in that maybe some of you guys kind of either didn't get from the video or maybe weren't directly stated in the video. So the first one is that in that video, which I suppose I can probably go ahead and give you guys a link to. Now, I'll go ahead and get the link, and I'll just post it in the chat for those of you who want to put it in your queue for later. There you go. Video link in the queue, or in the chat for you guys who want to see it. The Ravener 12 is a 12 gauge shotgun suppressor. And I think one of the questions that I wanted to really address is, why would you want to suppress a 12 gauge shotgun? And the answer to that really depends. If you're talking about a self-defense shotgun, then I could see wanting to take a little bit of the edge off. But in my mind, you want to suppress a shotgun because it reduces the recoil. Shotguns, if you're talking about like a self-defense shotgun, they're super short. Like, you're not going to have a very good experience with that, because what it has to do with is you have to understand how decibels are measured. Decibels are a related measurement. So it's a reference, it's a measurement change from a reference point. So like a pressure wave the pressure wave that is the decibel, or excuse me, the decibel measures a pressure wave, and it measures it over a particular distance. So when you consider that, having the thing farther away from your head is always going to be preferable to right there close to it. So if you got like a really short, like short barrel shotgun or something like that, and you're putting a suppressor on the end of it, it's not going to sound as great as if that suppressor was on like a 28-inch, goose gun or something like that. So it's going to just sound better. And all you really need to know to understand this is most of you have shot a 22 rifle and a 22 pistol, right? Most of you have, right? And I guarantee you that you can go out there right now and take your like Ruger 1022 out there and plink around with it, and you might get a little bit of ringing in your ear, but it's not going to be nearly as unpleasant, as if you took the magazine, a full magazine of like we'll just go ahead and go with Ruger and say like a Mark series, right? Your ears are going to ring considerably more just having that close to your face, that gun at the end of your arms versus all the way out in front of you. So same thing kind of goes hand in hand with the shotgun. Putting the shotgun suppressor all the way at the end of a long ass barrel is much better than having it close to your face. So getting that as far away from you as you can is good. But also when it comes to shotgun suppressors, we're talking about something that is inherently very loud. So the next comment that I kind of wanted to address was people were like, well, why didn't you use a short barreled shotgun with like mini shells or something like that? And the answer to that is, well, first of all, mini shells don't work in all shotguns. First of all, a lot of shotguns require some kind of an adaptation to be able to shoot mini shells. While I do have some, and they will be subsonic, that's not a realistic test. And I think that most people are not using mini shells in most applications when they're talking about shooting a shotgun. So I feel, even though like subsonic ammo is the thing, I think that one goes farther into the niche that it's not really as applicable, and I don't think that that's as good of an indicator. The other question was like, why didn't you use like there are some like borderline transonic rounds, like 1050-ish. Why didn't you use those? And well, first of all, that is one loading that exists. And to be quite frankly, transonic is not subsonic, and you're still going to get meh performance depending on your barrel length on that one. So if you shoot like those transonic rounds out of like an 18-inch barrel or out of a 26-inch barrel or something like that, you might be over the sound barrier and you're going to get the same performance. You have to understand that 12 gauge by itself is a very loud gun. And reducing the sound signature of a very loud gun is not as efficient as reducing the sound signature of a more quiet gun. So that's why something like a 300 blackout is easier to suppress. Even the supersonic stuff is easier than suppressing a 30-06 or a 308. Even though like the 308, like 300 blackout literally uses 308 bullets in the production of the ammunition, like those cartridges are not the same. One is considerably louder than the other, even though they're traveling both traveling above the sound barrier. Same thing with like 45 and 9mm. 45 is louder than 9mm. Like side by side, if you shoot a 9mm pistol and you meter it on a proper meter, a 9mm pistol is going to be less loud. The signature on the meter will be lower than if you shot a 45 right next to it, even though 45 ACP is for the most part subsonic. So the louder input for the same dB reduction is going to end you up with a louder gun. So overall, suppressing a shotgun is a more challenging proposition than some would seem to readily understand. So producing a silencer for a for a shotgun kind of goes along the lines of this. It needs to take the edge off. The prime function of that is going to be to reduce recoil and make it less heavy. because it's got to be out there for the best performance, got to be out there on the end of a long ass barrel. So that gun, typically when we're talking about shooting shotguns, we're talking about swinging them large degrees. Think about like trap shooting, skeet shooting, rabbit hunting, bird hunting, all that sort of stuff. You're sweeping that gun long distances, and having extra mass way out there on the end, making a super heavy, super long suppressor is going to be problematic. So you have to make all of these trade-offs, and that's what I've been trying to teach you guys basically since day one when I've started doing videos on suppressors, that all suppressors are a trade-off, and you have to pick which of those trade-offs they are. So if you want a really quiet 12-gauge suppressor, it's going to be fucking heavy, and that gun is going to be very difficult to operate. So just know that. In my experience, Whip Machine kind of goes in the direction of like, hey, we want to take the edge off. We're already talking about suppressing supersonic projectiles. We want to take the edge off. We want to make it a more usable device, reduce the recoil, not necessarily make it the most quiet can out there. And I think that that comes across in the video that I did. And I think that it is 100% a representation of the capabilities of that. So just understand that that whole video was undertaken for the purposes of you guys going into 2026, now that basically you don't have to pay an extra $200 to get your suppressors, that you aren't making really dumb purchasing decisions just because you don't have the added syntax in there. So anyway. Somebody says, what about an integrally made suppressor with a shorter barrel? Sometimes that can be applicable. It really depends. On a shotgun, probably not. Although there are some things in there. You have to understand that with the shotgun, for instance, you have the shot cup that is full of shot, right? So you have the shot cup, and it exits the barrel, and then it starts going through all these baffles, right? But it has a natural tendency to want to open up. And the longer you make that suppressor, the more likely that that shot cup is going to open up in there. And that's going to be problematic because shotguns, we want them to spread out, right? But if that pattern opens up too much inside that suppressor, you're going to have damage to that can, right? So there is literally a limit to how long you can make a shotgun suppressor. So just keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to other guns, other calibers out there, we've done plenty of different types of integrally suppressed guns. Was it this year? I'm pretty sure that it was this year. I did a video on the gosh, what's it called? I forget what it's called, but the Angstad Arms 9mm PCC. It uses like the baffleless technology. So it's got a barrel that's got a whole bunch of holes poked in it and a tube that goes over top of it. And the idea is that it vents out all that extra pressure, so you can shoot full powered 9mm ammunition, and it's going to vent a lot of that gas. It is specifically designed to not reach full pressure, so that those rounds will be subsonic, and that gas is vented into that expansion chamber, so it takes the edge off of it quite considerably. The only problem that I have with that specific thing is I would have liked to see them have it kind of like dead end in a couple baffles to knock the flash down a little bit. So basically, like right at the end of you can literally see the end of the barrel sticking out of the suppressor module. And because of that, you get a whole lot of flash. And I've told Rich Angstad that, and I obviously kept it in my video and all that sort of stuff, that as far as like nighttime performance on something like that, it's going to blow out your night vision, right? You're going to have a big bloom in the middle of your vision because of the flash from that. It's not really built for that. It's built for more of a daytime range thing. And what it does well. that particular aspect of it, I'd like to see them come out with a Gen 2 that either ends in a couple baffles inside of that sleeve. It's already a suppressor, so they might as well put some baffles in it, and or some kind of flash reducing end cap on the end of it that is going to knock that flash down at nighttime. That's what I say. That's what I would say. Are slugs an issue with suppressors? As far as shotgun suppressors are concerned, it depends. Like, for instance, the Ravener that we just did a video on, it has a couple different end caps that are available. And they basically, what their goal is to make it a more utilitarian device. So a Ravener, a shotgun with a Ravener on it is going to hold pattern longer than a shotgun without the Ravener on it. And you can see that in our groups that we shot, because it has a forcing cone at the end of it. And those forcing cones come in 3 different sizes. So they come in cylinder bore, a modified, and full choke. So that forcing cone will mimic having those chokes in your gun. So if you're shooting like birdshot out of that thing while you're like duck hunting or something like that, then you're going to get a tighter group for a longer distance out of the Ravener if you're shooting like a full choke Ravener. Slugs are problematic for modified and full chokes. But if you're running the cylinder bore variant, then you can run slugs out of that particular suppressor. But it's got to be the cylinder bore variant. So that's a very good question. Go watch that video. Like the original MP5 SD, kind of like the original MP5 SD. Although I will say about the MP5 SD is the MP5 is a roller delayed blowback. It is that's good and bad. They require more maintenance. They do. Anybody who tells you that they don't is wrong. But generally speaking, the sound performance out of an MP5 SD is going to be a little bit more superior to most of the things that you find these days, which are kind of more direct blowback guns. Although, is the Angstad gun a delayed blowback? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to go back and watch my own video. I'm sorry. Somebody asks, Cody asked, do you think a suppressor would work good on a Benelli M4 clone? So the Benelli M4, it depends on which one you're talking about, because there's a couple different ones, and I want to look at the barrel lengths here because there's a short variant and then there is a long variant. I think probably the long variant will be okay. So the Benelli M4 has what's called an auto-regulating gas system, and it's pretty robust. But let's be real. If you're running trash ammo through it, they don't run very well, all right? They just don't. They do not like trash ammo. So the short one, it all has to do with dwell time. So the way that the a dual piston gun like the Benelli M4 works is after it reaches over a particular input pressure, the gun is pretty much going to work. So if you rapidly increase that carrier speed, then you might have damage to the internal components, maybe. I've never actually shot a Benelli M4 suppressed, so I can't tell you. But the only thing that I am unsure about is if the Benelli M4 has a variant that will take chokes, which means that it would be very difficult to, put a suppressor on the end of it. So I'm not entirely sure about that. But generally speaking, the longer the gun is, the longer the gas system is, and generally speaking, that yields a lower impact on the gas system by putting a suppressor in it. You got to think about the volume and the distance and all that sort of stuff, and the dwell time. How much more is it going to dwell? The longer the barrel, the less that is going to be, the longer the barrel, the longer the gas system, the less impacted, the more distributed that gas input increase is going to be on the system. So the longer the gun, generally speaking, the better it runs. Think about like, before we really had adjustable gas blocks, putting a suppressor on the end of like a rifle length gas system was like awesome. But if you put it on a carbine gun before we had adjustable gas blocks and all that sort of stuff, it would beat the shit out of itself, right? So just think that, but apply it to the Benelli M4. Even though I understand it's a piston, and all that sort of stuff, like I get it. So to answer that question, do you think a suppressor would work good on a Benelli M4 clone? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if there are any M4 clones that take chokes. Usually the military barreled guns are cylinder bore fixed, and I'm not aware. I don't own an M4, so, a Benelli M4. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. CMMG, radio delay blowback. Yes. I don't think that the CMMG system is as good as some of the stuff that came before it, as far as like its efficiency is concerned, but it's a pretty close second, I gotta say. I don't think it's as good as the roller delayed system, but the roller delayed system is complicated. CMMG did an amazing thing by taking the existing parts in an AR, basically, changing the bevels of the locking lugs, and adding a spring to the system. And that allows it to lock longer. It has to basically spring itself back to unlock itself. And like I said, the camming action leaves it locked longer, which means more of it goes out the end than a direct blowback gun, right? So it's definitely better in a direct blowback gun. It's not as good as a roller delayed blowback gun, but there are fewer moving parts, and I gotta tell you, it's a hell of a lot easier to clean a CMMG radial delayed blowback gun than it is a roller delayed blowback gun. It's like night and day. You could teach a chimpanzee to clean a CMMG radial delayed blowback. You need armorer level maintenance on roller delayed guns when they go down. Cody says his came with a bunch of chokes, so I'm assuming that he means the Benelli M4. So I mean, maybe it does take chokes. I don't own one, but just looking at it, I'm not entirely sure that all of them take chokes. This probably is especially like a Turk Nelly. They probably do have chokes. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that there are variants that don't have chokes. I can't speak to it. So the shorter the barrel, the more likely to have issues. I want an SBS and I want to suppress it. Okay, so hang on a second. Not necessarily, but as a general rule, if you keep all the systems the same, right? Like if you keep, how to put this? If you take an AR-15, which is a very simplistic example of this, like it is basically a tube with a hole in it with a tube that goes back. And this is a great example because it is just raw gas in. You gas the system up and it goes all the way back. When you do that, as you move that barrel shorter in that gun, you run out of barrel. So you have to move the gas system farther back. So like think of the pistol barrels, right? The gas port distance, you got like pistol length, carbine length, mid-length, rifle length, right? The farther back you move that gas system, the higher the pressure will be. And you can look this up, right? Look at the gas port pressure of a mid-length gas system versus rifle length versus carbine versus a pistol, right? Those numbers are published. You can go look them up. As you get farther up the barrel, the pressure measurement reduces, which makes sense. If you think about the physics of it, the pressure drops as you go farther down the barrel. The closer you get to the chamber, the higher the pressure is going to be. That dictates how you drill the port size and how long it is open. You got to remember that there's a distance between the end of the muzzle, which is when the thing depressurizes, when the bullet leaves, the muzzle or the barrel depressurizes, therefore the gas system depressurizes. The distance between where the gas is bled off and the bullet exits is called the post-gas length. And that dictates how long that impulse lasts. We're talking fractions of a second, obviously. But the longer, or the shorter the barrel, the shorter the gas system has to be, so the higher the pressure. And the longer the post-gas length, the longer that impulse is going to act. So as we shrink the guns, we increase the pressure, generally speaking, also decrease the dwell time, depending on the post-gas length. And by doing that, increase the carrier speed. That's why in like ARs and stuff like that, we have adjustable gas blocks. We also have like heavier buffers and heavier carriers and heavier springs and stuff like that that go in those shorter guns over like if you're running like a rifle length gas system, for instance. I hope that makes sense. There's a whole lot of that. I've done a bunch of videos on this, and I think that if you dig in that a little bit more, you will find that those are the correct answers. Okay, so I need to bring that full circle. Yeah, so when you put a suppressor on that, you can think of that as artificially increasing that post-gas length. So if the barrel's this long, and say that the gas bleeds off here, it usually has this amount of time for the bullet to move from here to the end of the muzzle to be under pressure. But if I add a suppressor to the end of it, well, then it's got this amount of time to be pressurized. So that increases the gas load on the system, increases the dwell time. Well, increases the dwell time that then increases the gas load on the system, which then will increase the carrier speed, right? And so that's why guns will beat themselves up if you don't have an adjustable gas block or a heavy carrier or something like that in it. That's why we do those sort of things, to slow that whole system down. In a piston gun, that's another level of complication. And that's why those piston guns, oftentimes piston guns will have some kind of adjustable block on it as well, because depending on if it's short or long stroke piston. The Benelli M4 is a self-regulating system, which is a fancy way to say that you can't mess with it. And they found a way to allow it to vent an extra amount. So what I'm saying is that the shorter guns are going to be more likely to experience those problems because of the things that I just explained to you, because they may not be properly regulated to be able to handle that extra impulse time. Okay. Radio delay is a magnificent invention, and I think it's a large part of why delay systems are becoming more common now. People are less interested in straight blowback. Yeah, no, I'm not trying to take that away from CMMG. Don't misunderstand me. I think that it is a magnificent invention. Just understand that it is not as efficient on the suppressed side of things, and the actual pressure cycle and how the whole thing pressurizes and unlocks and all that sort of stuff is not as efficient as the roller delayed system, but it's a close second. At what point in the bullet travel does peak pressure happen? Peak pressure is at the chamber. The chamber pressure is the highest pressure point. And this makes sense, right? It's what you end up having. You have to consider that not all the powder burns instantaneously, right? But a large proportion of the powder burns in the first couple fractions of a second once the primer's initiated. You're gonna have a large proportion of it. Once that powder burns to a substantial degree, right, that's when you're going to achieve maximum pressure. Now, when does that occur? Well, we've never actually had a camera inside of a chamber to tell us when exactly all the powder burns. Theoretically, we think that it's before the projectile is dislodged from the crimp. Theoretically, that's what we think. But the powder still continues to burn as the bullet is moving up that barrel, right? So not all of it is burned by the time. If you got like a shorty gun, you can get a lot of unburnt powder and overburn, big flash out the front. That's all the extra powder that didn't get burned, all flashing at once, right? But you can understand why the pressure drops over the course of the bullets traveled down the barrel by simple pressure equations. Think of it as a cylinder of gas behind the bullet. As the bullet goes down the barrel, that cylinder's volume increases. So you're still burning powder and you're still putting pressure into the barrel, but the cylinder is always getting bigger until that bullet leaves, and then the pressure drops to zero, right? When the bullet passes the gas port, it gets another increase, right? So you get a drop in pressure. If you were measuring the pressure, you would get a huge spike, and then you would get kind of a degradative decline in your pressure if you measured it across the length of the barrel. If you put a whole bunch of ports in it and measured it every inch, you would find at some point you reach a maximum pressure, and then the pressure slowly degrades as you move down the barrel. But wherever that gas bleed off is, you're going to have a spike downward. So it'll be like one of these, right? And then it'll spike and then plateau off, continue to do that downward decline until the bullet leaves, right? So then that's just simple physics, because you're going to have a continuous, you would never see like a big spike and then a drop, right, like that, like you won't see that because there's still some powder being burned. So there's still some pressure being added as the bullet moves down. And we did a test of this years ago where we went out and actually tested how long is too much barrel. We actually went out with a 45 caliber gun from CMMG, and I chopped the barrel down inch by inch with a chop saw. And I published data on that. That video should still be available online, yeah, where you can go see that there is a point where too much barrel is a thing. So you can increase the length of the barrel so much that you end up getting to the point where you get drag. So you've reached that maximum pressure, you have pushed the barrel down or pushed the projectile down the barrel, and what ends up happening as far as your velocity is concerned, if you map it, is the short, like you get a sharp increase in velocity, and then velocity will continue to go up until you reach the maximum burn of the powder. And then you get kind of a plateau where the bullet's just kind of like skipping at its velocity down the barrel. And then after that length, you start to see the velocity decline because there's drag in the barrel that's actually the frictional forces of the barrel are starting to take over versus the powder burn. So as you cut that back, you can see that there is an optimum length, and I forget what it is, but I can tell you that I think 40 inches is too long. I think. I forget how long the barrel actually was, but anyway. The radio delay, yes. To clarify, yes, I was not ripping on it. I've got some excellent reviews of the CMMG system. Even though I believe that they're currently mad at me right now, but that's a story for another day. It's unfortunate, but I still think that they make a great product. So just throwing that out there. Anyway, School of the American Rifle, I do like that channel. I've seen it before. I don't watch a whole lot of GunTube, but most of the stuff that I do watch as far as GunTube is concerned is pretty nerdy stuff. So I'm aware of his channel. You should go check that out for sure. Powder burn rate matters the most on efficient length of barrel or powder. Is that a question? I'm not entirely sure. Wervil 6 says, thank you for the explanation of great internal ballistics discussion. Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that. Powder burn rate is important, and it really depends, right? So, like, for instance, that's why we picked a 45 ACP gun for that test, because it's going to be a pistol powder that's designed to burn off rather rapidly, because in pistols, we usually have a rather short barrel to get all the work done. So that powder has a very fast burn rate to achieve very high chamber pressures very quickly and do all of its thing in a couple inches. But if you take that, for instance, and you shoot like a 45 ACP out of like a 16-inch barrel, you don't see a huge increase in a 45 ACP rounds maximum potential out of a 16-inch barrel versus like your 5-inch barrel. You might have a couple 100 feet per second difference in that difference, but you're not going to be shooting like 2,000 feet per second out of that gun because it's all extinguished itself by that time. It's met its maximum burn. So we used a really long 45 ACP barrel knowing that we were most likely going to get an answer of how much barrel is too much barrel in that caliber, because we knew that we were going to get all of our powder burn in the first couple inches, and then we were going to have a whole bunch of extra barrel to be able to see any kind of effects on the velocity of that bullet as it was leaving. I'm going to really quick, and while we're in the background, I'm going to see if I can find that you know what? Oh, here it is. Found it. And for those of you who want to watch that video on what I did, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat right now for anybody who wants to go watch that specific video. So anyway, you guys can go watch that video. You can see what I'm talking about as far as that is concerned. But this week, and I guess before I get there, I'm always taking video suggestions from you guys. I actually have 2 videos coming up in the next week or so that are direct submissions from you guys. So if you have any specific videos that you would like to see on any particular topic, generally general topics are easier for me to make videos on instead of like dedicated like product videos or something like that. Leave a comment, send me an email or something like that. If you got a specific question, if I think it's a good video, I'll make a video about it. If it's just a question that I don't think is like really worth a video, then I'll just answer your question. But I consider me a resource in those spaces. If I don't know the answer though, I will just tell you that I don't know the answer. But you guys give me some of the best ideas. So this week we're going to have 2 videos specifically that came from your guys' questions. And both of them are going to be on suppressor stuff with the impending 2026 tax stamp going away. Or not tax stamp going away, the tax on the stamp going away, the need to have to pay the $200 unconstitutional tax and submit to that part of the unconstitutionality is going away, but you still have to submit to the unconstitutional, outdated background check and registration. So there is that. So let's see. 182QFTW says, saw a similar study on 9mm PCC. Short barrel wasn't using all the gases and velocity increased until 7 or 11 inches in length. Yes. So like a 16-inch barrel, there's been a lot of conjecture for a while now that 16-inch barrels on pistol caliber carbines are overkill. And that's one of the reasons I kind of made that video was pistol caliber carbines, generally speaking, after 11 or 14 inches, depending on the ammunition, you're basically met most of your powder burn. You're not getting anything extra from the 16-inch barrel. The whole thing is arbitrary bullshit that was set by the government. And you have to remember that the tax stamp, the guidelines was originally 18 inches on all rifles. Anything under 18 inches was considered a short-barreled rifle. That's why you have the difference now in 16 versus 18 for shotguns. They used to all be 18 inches, but the federal government imported a whole bunch of M1 carbines and sold them to the populace, and those had 16-inch barrels. And they were like, oops, our bad. So they changed the regulation. So that is why you have 16-inch on short-barreled rifles and 18-inch on short-barreled shotguns. That whole number is entirely arbitrary. Somebody just picked that number at some point in time. It's completely ridiculous because there aren't a lot of pistols out there that even have like if you think handguns, there aren't they exist, but there aren't a lot of handguns, like legit like handguns that have over 10-inch barrels. There are some, I own one, but generally speaking, you're talking about like Magnum handguns. But most of them you're talking about 6 inches or less. Like you think about most, even long slide guns, you're talking about 6 inches barrel. Most concealed carry guns have between 3 and 5 inches of barrel. So anyway, getting in the weeds on that one. I did want to mention one more time before we go today that Today's live stream was brought to you by First Form. They have been a sponsor for over a year now of the channel. We thank them for making today's live stream possible. I have a link listed in all the relevant places that you can run down. Use that to visit their website and browse their wares. I tend to use their protein sources, like their proteins, their meat sticks and their protein bars. But also, if you want to bump a caffeine or something like that, then they make some pretty good. Pre-workout. I have to say, they got a high test version and then a normal people version. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have been the high speed, like give me 600 milligrams of caffeine right now type person. Now I'm kind of more like 2 cups of coffee is too much for me. But I think that they are doing a really good job on most of their products out there, specifically in those 2 areas, and you should check them out. They're a pro-freedom supplement company, and we thank them very much for helping us stay on mission here at the VSO Gun Channel. So thank them for sponsoring the live stream. And then I see one more question here. Speaking of the tax stamp going to $0, do you personally feel that when we get the political power leaning the other way that they will increase it before our big lawsuit gets sorted out, or does anything? Well, at the current rate that things are going with the Department of Justice, the most pro-Second Amendment thing since the self-contained cartridge, irony there, sarcasm, continuing to fight against our lawsuit, then I'm not sure if that will complete before we get out or not. If it does, and in that case has not gone all the way up and been completed, then I guarantee you one of the first orders of business from the gun control side of things will be to moot our case by reinstituting that tax and probably raising it to a historical analog of like $5,000 or something like that. So I'm just telling you that's going to happen. Guaranteed. Even if the lawsuit doesn't make it all the way through, or even if the lawsuit does make it all the way through, they might still try to do that. That's why the whole thing with the Republicans backstabbing us and the big bloated backstab bill was such a big deal. But anyway, fire Pam Bondi, you're right. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. It was great to do a live stream with you today, a little bit later in the day. I think that we might start to creep these a little bit later in the day as we go, because I think the viewership's better in the evenings on a Sunday. I understand why people may not be available right in the middle of the day. I was just doing the live streams like right after church on Sundays because that was the time that always worked for me. I might schedule these later in the day for the purposes of, being available for you guys, because I know that, people are busy on Sundays, particularly this time of year. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Great to talk to you. Great having a discussion with you. And of course, prayers for all the folks in Australia, and hopefully their government pulls their head out of their ass, as well as everybody else in the world, gets with the program that the only way that you can fix this situation is to meet it with instantaneous, insurmountable return force.